My name is Ben Atherton-Zeman. I'm a spokesperson for a group called the National Organization for Men Against Sexism, and I'm so excited to be here at the National Conference. I am a proud, card-carrying, lifetime member of the National Organization for Women. Okay, thank you, but that's easy, right? Doing what y'all do. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't be here without feminist women like you having taught me everything I know. But so thanks for the applause, but give a round of applause for yourselves too, okay? Can you do that? My day job is I perform a one-man feminist play called Voices of Men. I perform that play on campuses, college campuses, and communities. I had the great honor to perform it last year at the National Now Conference in Florida, and I'm so thrilled to give you a little taste of it this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kermit the Frog.
Good morning, Kermit the Frog here. Very happy to be here at the Mothers and Caregivers Plenary. Yay! How's everyone so far? How's your conference? Yes. You probably know my friend Elmo. Good morning, Elmo. How are you?
Very well. So nice to be here at the Mothers and Caregivers Plenary.
Yeah, they do so much work, and yet it's so underappreciated.
We should do something nice for them, and for other nice now feminists.
Well, how about we sing them a song?
Would you like to hear a song?
Yes!
Okay, so for those 10 people, we will sing a song.
Well, what song do you like?
Well, Emma likes all of Friday's songs.
Well, how about we sing a song about gender socialization? What's that?
Emma pretty much does not have a gender.
Well, do you remember when you were in the toy stores?
Yes, Emma remembers hanging on a shelf.
Well, do you remember how there was a girls section
Yes, it was all pink.
and the boys section?
Yes, it was all blue. Seemed very silly to Emma.
It seems silly to a lot of feminists, so this song is about that. It's not easy being blue. There's so many things you're not supposed to do, like have feelings, be gay, eat quiche, or cry.
Emma understands, and it's not easy being pink. This is very low note for Emma. And it's not easy being pink. You're judged by how you look, not how you think. And you're paid less and abused and harassed when you walk by.
So I think we can both agree
The system's bad for you and me.
it certainly has room for improvement.
So let's join the feminist movement.
It's not easy, social change. You get made fun of, get called names. When gender norms you try to rearrange.
And it's women who've built the bridge. It's men who have male privilege. So men should listen to women for a change. Thank you.
Thank you.
This conference has been brought to you in part by the Burger Marx Foundation. The national organization would like to thank the Burger Marx Foundation for its generous grant of $5,000, which helps support the conference workshops, which were devoted to discussing organizing women workers, strengthening unions, and mentoring young activists focused on improving wages and working conditions for women. Welcome, everyone. My name is Alendra Letsum, and I'm the Membership Vice President for the National Organization for Women. Some would think that with my mother as an example, I would consider myself an expert on issues related to feminist parenting, mothering, and caregiver issues. I don't, but some could think that I do. And here's the reason. Mom, raise your hand. But about a year and a half ago, I was buying holiday gifts for young people, and I was on the Lego website, which is my favorite gift to buy for young people. And at the time, although you can't find it anymore, Lego had a pink box and a blue box of basic Lego pieces. And I was loading up my cart, and I was all set to press buy and say, check, done. But I noticed there was a difference in the number of Lego pieces between the boxes. The pink box had 8 less Lego pieces than the blue box. Well, needless to say, I was outraged. And I said so on my Facebook page, and many of my friends shared my outrage, but a few of my friends sent me some links with the words, "You ain't seen nothing yet." And from that, I went down a rabbit hole from which I have still not yet fully emerged. For the past few years, mothers and caregivers have been at the epicenter of a brewing storm. To name a few topics, we've had tiger moms, attachment parenting, birth choice, home birth, breastfeeding. Anybody tired yet? Mothers aren't. Child-free restaurants, stroller moms, sandwich generation, and on top of those, their value to society, the value of mothers and caregivers to society and the economy has still not been fully realized. Motherhood is being discussed as a spectacle, and caregivers are in crisis. As feminists, it's our duty to inform ourselves on the issues that these women are facing and the importance of the roles they have taken on. It may sound trite, but not a one of us would be here without a mother. And we are all going to be in need of a caregiver at some point in our lives, be it a nurse, a doctor, an aide, or a supporter. This plenary will touch on just a few of the topics that mothers and caregivers are facing, but I urge my now sisters to inform themselves on these issues. I am so excited to introduce our first speaker on the topic of mothers and caregivers. Miriam Zoila Perez is trained as a birth and abortion doula. In 2007, she founded Radical Doula, a blog that covers the intersections of birth activism and social justice. During her 4 years as an editor at feministing.com, the site was awarded the Hillman Prize for Blog Journalism, thanks in no small part to her tireless efforts. Miriam's writing has appeared in The Nation, Color Lines, The American Prospect, and she's a regular columnist at RH Reality Check. She frequently travels around the country speaking at colleges and universities about feminism and reproductive justice. In 2010, she received both the Barbara Seaman Award for Activism in Women's Health and the Lambda Literary Foundation Emerging LGBT Voice Award in Nonfiction. And, if she didn't have enough to do, she also serves on the board of directors of the Estrella Lesbian Foundation for Justice. Please help me welcome the radical doula herself, Ms. Miriam Zoila Perez.
Hi everyone. Thanks so much to Alendra and Terry and everyone else who invited me to be here today. This is my first NOW conference. So I'm really happy to be here, and I want to talk a little bit about sort of why I'm a radical doula. So how many people here know what a doula is? Nice, that's great. I think every time I ask that question, more and more people raise their hand. So for those of you who don't know, a doula is a person trained to provide emotional, psychological, and informational support to people during pregnancy and childbirth. A doula is not a midwife, a doula is not an obstetrician, a doula is not a medical provider. A doula is really a support person. And you know, different doulas play different roles, and I'll talk a little about what my doula work has looked like. But first I want to talk about how I became a doula. So I was really excited about women's health for a long time. Ever since I can remember, I used to be the person at the sleepovers, looking through my friends' books about bodies and health. And when I went to college, I was like, I'm going to be an obstetrician. I'm going to be pre-med. And then I took organic chemistry, and that was the end to my pre-med career. But luckily, I continued with my interest in women's health, and I found a class about the anthropology of reproduction. And in that course, we watched a documentary called Born in the USA. You'd probably have trouble finding it. It would be in the VHS in some library somewhere. But it was a really eye-opening experience. And the documentary chronicled 3 birthing environments: a birth in a hospital setting, a birth with a midwife in a birthing center, and a birth with a midwife in home. And I walked out of that class that day being like, that just changed my life. And there was just something about, I'd already been kind of political. I was pro-choice for a long time. I felt like an activist, but there was something about that particular understanding of what I saw as the problems in our maternity care system that just activated me, and I got really excited, and I was like, this is what I want to do. So I was going to become a midwife, and that was kind of my plan. And I spent some time with a midwife who was like, you should really consider becoming a doula if you want to do midwifery, to see if you really want to do this as your career. So I was like, what's a doula? And then I sort of fell into it and came into that work. And it ended up being, I haven't gone back to the midwifery path, and I've stuck with doula work. And I found that it felt like a really, you know, I was somebody who'd been doing activism, doing a lot of organizing on my college campus, and sort of the kind of activist that folks in my generation, I'm 28, do these days, but there was something about doula work, about being with one person and trying to support them through an experience that can be life-changing, to try to make that one experience better, that really just felt really fulfilling and felt like it was such a different type of activism than what I was doing in a more political way, and it really has fueled me over the years and been like an important grounding piece of the work that I do, to just feel like in that one moment, despite whatever's going on outside and the political context and all of that, in that one moment I can do something to try to make one person's experience better, right? And the main way that I do that, you know, there's lots of skills that doulas bring, but I feel like our most important one is just being there and witnessing someone's experience without trying to change it. So I'm really just there being like, whatever you're feeling is how you're feeling, that's the way you should be feeling, smiling, listening, those like really basic skills. So doula work has been a really important part of my work, even as I, you know, do other things. I'm a writer, you know, involved in politics, but this really sort of tangible one-to-one attempt at improving someone's experience in the medical system has really been formative for me. So I was in college and I started doing doula work, and I was volunteering as a doula in a public hospital in North Carolina, and getting really even more infuriated about the way that birth happens in hospitals, and the way that particularly immigrant women are treated. I'm Cuban American, I speak Spanish, so I often end up in public hospital settings working with Spanish-speaking Latino women, and you know, there's just a lot of problems with the way that the medical system treats women in general, but particularly women of color and immigrant women. But fast forward a couple of years, and other things had gone on in my political life. I came out of the closet as queer. I started to explore questions around gender and my own gender identity. And it brought me back to my doula work and made me ask a lot of questions about how does this fit in. The world of midwifery and doula work can be very heteronormative, it can be very white-dominated, it can be very straight. And so I found that I wasn't sure how these different pieces of my identity and my politics fit in with my work as a doula. And so that's what led me to found the blog Radical Doula. I wanted to talk about kind of being a doula from my perspective, my politics, my identity, and how those things all made sense to each other. One of the big things that motivated that was being pro-choice and being a doula. Because although I didn't realize it for a number of years, because I didn't realize it for a number of years, but actually a lot of people in the doula and midwifery community are really anti-choice. There's a large Christian religious contingent in that world, and the reason I didn't realize it because I would go to these conferences and be part of these communities, and nobody would talk about abortion. It was just like zip lip, and so I naively was like, oh, they probably all agree with me, and that's just like not what we're talking about today. But lo and behold, not true. And so when I realized that, it was part of what made me decide to start Radical Doula, because for me those things made sense and went together and weren't a contradiction. And it was all part of my philosophy of providing unconditional, non-judgmental support to people during pregnancy and childbirth. Any phase of pregnancy and childbirth, regardless of the outcome. So just like as a doula, I don't judge people for choosing a cesarean section or an epidural or to birth at home or in a hospital. I also don't judge them for the outcome of their pregnancy, whether they're having a miscarriage or an abortion. So that was all part of the philosophy. So Radical Doula was really me being like, here's why doula work makes sense in this context. Here's why it makes sense that I'm queer and a doula. Here's why it makes sense that I do doula work as activism, that I want to work with Latina immigrants, that I'm a Latina myself. Here's how all these things go together. So that was really why I founded Radical Doula 5 years ago. And part of it was that I felt really alone in this sort of set of politics, and I felt like alienated from the doula community. But I'm really happy to say that 5 years later, there's a lot of people in this world who do doula work, who feel similarly to the way that I do, who bring their politics to the center, who really feel like all of these pieces of social justice work make sense and are a big piece of their work as doulas. So I feel really happy to say that there's many people out there who also feel the same. And part of what I think is, there's kind of a new movement, I would say, in the doula community of people who bring these activist principles to their doula work. You know, I think historically, doulas have only been around as a formal sort of role for about 40 years. And I would say up until the last maybe 15, most of the time people who were doulas got into that work because they gave birth themselves and then had either a positive experience or a negative experience and wanted to help other people in their experiences with pregnancy and birth. I've never had kids, I've never given birth, and there's a growing movement of people like me who are young people and who are activists who find doula work as a way to forward their activism and a way to like make try to make those small but incremental changes in people's lives and improve their experiences in the medical system. So that's been a big change, and I think that's part of the reason why I feel like there's a rise in people who identify as doulas with politics, whether they say radical or not. There's also kind of a growing movement of doulas called full spectrum doulas, who also similarly provide support, so doula support to people across the spectrum of pregnancy. So anything from abortion and miscarriage to childbirth to adoption, across the whole spectrum providing that support. So I helped to found an organization in New York City in 2007 called the Doula Project that does exactly that. We provide doula support to people during pregnancy and childbirth. Most of the doula support we provide is during abortion and miscarriage. So we partner with, I think it's 5 different settings in New York City, public hospital settings, Planned Parenthood settings, and we are the volunteer kind of core in that setting. And we provide support to every person who comes through to have a procedure. So, oh, okay, thank you. So, I was like missing the timekeeper. So yeah, so it's an exciting movement. There's lots and lots of groups around the country since then who've propped up, who are doing the same work. And it's really about making the political statement that these two things aren't separate, and it's the same people who are having these experiences, and we deserve to support them. So thank you.
I'm going to be honest with you. I have been struggling on how to introduce our next speaker, and I will tell you why. I have known Jo Paoletti for over 20 years. She's been my neighbor, my schoolmate's mom, but one of her most influential roles in my life has been as my Girl Scout troop leader. Brownie Troop 702, Junior Troop 127, Cadet Senior 25. She is one of the people who believes so strongly that girls can be awesome and independent that she went out and actively worked to make girls awesome and independent. And for all of the leaders in green who have and are still doing that, now should applaud them because they are building the next generation of athletes. But Jo Paoletti is also so much more than a Lendros Girl Scout leader. With a background in the history of fashion and clothing, Jo has spent more than 30 years researching and writing about children's clothing in the United States, particularly focusing on the development of gender differences. Her first book, Pink and Blue, Telling the Boys from the Girls in America, was just published this year. She's even been at parties where people are quoting her book to her. Even Peggy Ornstein, author of the book we were all reading last year, Cinderella Ate My Daughter, said that Paoletti shatters myths about what girls and boys naturally like, and does so with details that will fascinate both the casual and professional reader. Her next book, which just got publisher's approval, will cover unisex fashion during the period of 1965 to 1985. Yes, leisure suits will be in there. And then, after that, she will write one about society-determined, age-appropriate styles for older women, including old lady clothes, mother of the bride dresses, cougars, and in her own words, other such nonsense. My sisters, please help me welcome my good friend, Jo Paoletti.
And I assured Alendra that there were no embarrassing pictures of her in my slideshow. No, because a Girl Scout is honest. I'm a historian, and I've gotten myself into the situation of being a historian who writes about things that are everyday life that people think they know something about and will tell me about all the time, and then they'll ask my advice about things. And I usually preface it with, well, I'm a historian, not a psychologist. I'm a historian, not a child development person. I finally decided to just stop and say, okay, I'm a historian and I do know about this stuff. It's just from an oddly perverse angle. The question that underlies a lot of my research is how do we support children developing healthy gender identities? And especially, how does our culture help us do that or keep us from doing that? My most recent work, Pink and Blue, has been focused on understanding the role of culture in shaping the landscape around children as they grow up, and what they understand to be masculine or feminine, what the rules are, how they enforce the rules, and then how they in turn shape the rules as they grow up. Because each of us, just as we all have mothers, we all used to be kids. And the culture that we live in is partially the culture we create from those childhood experiences. Now, a lot of people think of fashion as cyclical, or it's kind of smoothly evolutionary. It's not. Those of us who study fashion know that it's the changes that happen, although they may appear to be cycles, things don't ever really come back just as they were. Nor has the evolution of fashion been one of smooth progress towards some kind of ideal clothing that we're all going to wear, in the year 2200 or whatever. Instead, I borrowed a term that evolutionary biologists use that's punctuated equilibrium. There are moments of very rapid change in fashion, and then they're followed by a period sometimes of settling in, sometimes a kind of reactionary period saying, whoops, that was too far, we're going to roll that back. If you think of the short dresses that women wore in the 1920s, in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, they're all much longer, and then all of a sudden you get shorter in the 60s, and then that gets rolled back to middies and pants instead. So there is this kind of push-pull that happens in fashion, and probably larger in culture as well, but all I study is fashion. So looking at children's clothing, the gendering of that is not a cycle, it's not a progress. I'm going to show you just a few slides that kind of show you those moments of rapid change and stress that have occurred just within the last, say, 125 years in children's clothing. And it's interesting to me that these changes very often occur against the backdrop of the development of women's rights in this country. And it happens at the same time as some of those arguments and discussions are going on. So this is the very short version. Pink and Blue is almost 200 pages long. So they said it worked. Yes. Okay. And can we get the room any darker near the slides? Because we can't see. That is the invention of boys' clothing at the end of the 18th century. What that is a one-piece, you read this as a jumpsuit. It was called a skeleton suit. It was a one-piece outfit for boys who were too old for baby clothes and not old enough for men's clothing. This is the first real children's clothing that existed in history. That before then, there were babies and then there was adult clothing. There were babies that went right from long dresses and diapers and that sort of thing to just miniature version of what adults wore. And the skeleton suit is a moment where there's a whole lot of reform in education and this idea that children need to be treated specially, need special education, particularly boys. And that's why there's no change really that happens in the girls' dress. There's a big change that happens in boys' clothing. Okay, this is all from around the turn of the century. This is the introduction of rompers, the ancestor of today's onesie, and bloomers as everyday dress. Bloomers are obviously introduced in the middle of the 19th century by Amelia Bloomer and other feminists, but never really get adopted for everyday wear until the end of the 19th century, where they're adopted for athletic wear and kind of universal play wear for little girls. Then we have the elimination of dresses as neutral baby clothes. So it used to be that all babies wore white dresses. That's Ernest Hemingway on the left and Franklin Roosevelt on the right, and their little white dresses. And that's very pink, and it says it's a baby card from the late 1950s. It's congratulations, it's a girl. You have, after the elimination of the white dresses, you have the acceptance of pink and blue as gender colors. That really doesn't happen until the mid-20th century. Before then, it's not certain which one's for boys and which one's for girls, and they're used together a lot as just baby colors. Then we have, with the feminist movement of the 60s and 70s, the unisex clothing movement, which is what I'm now researching more, where it's considered a good idea to raise children as gender-free as possible. This should start sounding familiar. Remember I said cycles, but it's not cycles. Punctuated with equilibrium. And then after that, for some reason, beginning in the mid-80s, we have the reemergence of hyper-binary clothing for babies and toddlers with very few neutral options. So the little bands on the heads for the girl babies. Now, at the risk of falling into a a childbirth metaphor too easily, but it always, when I hear the word transition, it always harkens back to my own childbirth experiences. Transition, if you've been through it, is not a pleasant experience. And after that comes the urge to push, which is also not a pleasant experience, but there's this visceral, I gotta do this. I think in this period right now where you're starting to get this, we've had some changes happening where there is more attention to a demand for neutral clothing, a demand for attention to gender variant or gender creative children. So there is this kind of urge to push, a caution in the word, this urge to push. You really need to understand the relationship between gender and sex in a consumer society as it's now understood. One of the mistakes that was made back in the unisex era was that people jumped to the conclusion that nurture was could completely trump nature. That you could dress your child any way you wanted and you could control their gender identity. And it became really obvious as those kids grew up that was not true. But the other problem with that, besides the science not being quite right, and I highly recommend Anne Fausto Sterling's Sex, Gender, Biology in a Social World, recently published just this spring, as a very short, concise, readable digest of the current science on sex and gender, which complicates it immensely. The other thing is to start questioning those binaries. If we see neutral, unisex, as being this halfway point between feminine and masculine, we are falling into a trap. Instead, consider one of my favorites. This is Sandra Bem's model, going back to the late 1970s, of the axes being high masculine, high feminine, low feminine, with, and I did my own little drawings here, of the lower right is high feminine, low masculine, and that's the girly princess stuff. High masculine, low feminine, that's the here comes trouble, whatever, boy stuff. But then looking instead saying, well, there's unisex, that's this thing on the binary in the middle. Say, there's this whole territory that needs to be explored of the high feminine, high masculine, which would be androgynous, and the true unisex or neutral stuff would be low feminine, low masculine. I await your questions and comments. I will be hanging around for the rest of the day, so you can talk to me later about this. And see you online.
The woman I'm about to introduce next was selected by Women's E-News as one of the 21 leaders for the 21st century, and she was appointed by President Clinton to be the National Advisory Council for Health on Human Services. Her work in indigenous communities is beyond compare. She's an active participant in the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. She is the founder of the Yankton Sioux Reservation in South Dakota, a center which for over 26 years has been known for its work and publication on indigenous women's reproductive justice on all levels, local, national, and international. She has consulted with the World Health Organization's Global AIDS Program, addressed the UN Human Rights Commission, and participated in the Working Group on Indigenous Populations. And in 2001, she facilitated a UN working group on the current status of the health of the world's indigenous peoples. As the executive director of the Native American Women's Health Education Resource Center, their newest report, Indigenous Women's Dialogue, a roundtable report on the accessibility of Plan B as an over-the-counter within the Indian Health Services, which was available in your conference bags. Please help me welcome Ms. Sharon Asatoyer.
Thank you for such a gracious introduction. Pardon me. I'm here to talk about violence against Native American and Alaska Native women, and how we're denied due process within the courts as well as within our healthcare service, which is the Indian Health Service, especially after a sexual assault has been committed against us. Indian Health Service is a division of the Health and Human Services, which is a federal agency, as you all know. Native women experience sexual assault at a much higher rate than all other races living here in the United States. 34.1%, or more than 1 in 3 Native women, will be raped in her lifetime. With most sexual assault committed against Indian women being interracial, with more than 85% of the perpetrators by non-Indian men, with the majority of whom are white, and that is according to the Department of Justice statistics. And 92% of Native girls who have been who've had sexual intercourse reported being forced against their will. These statistics are like those of a war-torn country. I point this out because human rights violations of this nature occur every day in Indian country. Currently, Violence Against Women Act is being considered or debated within the floors of the US Congress. And recently, it passed the Senate, but not without going through heinous debate processes. The issues that are most programmatic are whether or not tribal courts should be able to have authority to arrest and prosecute non-Indian perpetrators. We're talking about non-Indian rapists. Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson from Texas, a Republican, expressed concern that tribal courts operating on Indian reservations will attempt to arrest and impose, in quote, any American if legislation aimed at protecting Native women from criminal violence passes the US Congress. The fact that a US Senator would publicly make such a comment is an excellent example of how open this country's government elected officials are about not affording equal protection of the law and extending due process to Native rape victims. Basically, Senator Hutchinson is saying that it is okay for non-Indians to commit rape against Native American women and men. Many non-Indian Americans are currently able to commit crimes on Indian reservations without facing any consequences, according to federal research. And the US attorneys declined to prosecute 67% of sexual abuse and related matters that occur in Indian country. And this is according to the US governmental counting offices. And they reported those statistics in 2010, so they're pretty current. The VAWA bill, which is open for debate on the House side, you know, there's been amendments that oppose certain sections that include tribal jurisdiction on Indian lands against non-Indian perpetrators. And what is being proposed is a denial of equal protection of the law based on race. I also want to talk about the health services that Native women receive when they enter an Indian health service facility after a rape. What does it mean for a Native woman to be denied information about a sexual assault that could prevent an unwanted pregnancy, to not be informed of or offered emergency contraceptive, and at a later date have to face the trauma of a pregnancy from a rape? What kind of a government would impose such a trauma on a woman? To force her to experience such a cruel and emotional life event. For thousands of Native women all over the country, this is our reality. Although Plan B and its generic forms are legal as OTCs or over-the-counter contraceptives for women aged 17 years and up, Native women do not have consistent access to it from our primary healthcare provider, and that's the Indian Health Service. For land-based reservation Native American women, the only pharmacist on most reservations is within the local Indian Health Service. Other options would be to travel to the nearest city to a mainstream pharmacy to access Plan B, which could be as far away as 100 miles one way. Now, does a Native woman always have the resources to travel that 100 miles to find a pharmacy that carries Plan B? Does she have a car? Does she have money and to pay someone or the gas to get there? And the $50 to purchase Plan B. Native women Native women need more resources than other women to access Plan B, and these barriers prevent access to Plan B for Native women. Now, unfortunately, these statistics tell us that Native women are sexually assaulted at a higher rate than all other women in the United States and receive less health care services and less due process after a sexual assault. This situation is unacceptable and needs to be resolved in order to bring some relief and equality in treatment. As Native women, we are the only race of women that is denied the service based on race. To make an exception to a legal form of contraceptive based on race is unacceptable. To deny Native women access to Plan B is an OTC. When every other woman in this country can access it, it is a denial to a basic health care service which violates our human rights. It is a direct violation of our sovereign right to make decisions over our own health care, and it removes us from the decision-making process concerning a potential pregnancy relating to, resulting from a rape, and puts that decision in the hands of government. That is unacceptable. On March, on March 12th, we released a report, and the report most of you received in your handbags. We called it Push the Button Day. We asked our sisters and allies that work in the mainstream RJ, reproductive justice organizations, to upload our PDF copy of the report and to email it out to their listservs. We put it on social networks. And within 3 days, the media was calling, every blog, feminist blog in the country was carrying it, from CNN to Mother Jones. AP reporter had picked it up, New York Times is talking about it and mentioning it in articles, radio interviews, etc. And then Shelby Knox, I heard her name mentioned before during this conference. Then Shelby Knox called and said, well, can we do a change.org petition? And I said, sure, but you don't want my face. I'm a 61-year-old, have had a hysterectomy, female who doesn't need Plan B. So Sonny Clifford, a young native Oglala from the Pine Ridge, stepped to the podium and said, hey, I'll do it. So Sonny became the face of our campaign and started the change.org. And if y'all haven't signed it, please do. As of the other day, we had 103,000+ signatures. And if you want to check in and see how much attention we've gotten, just Google Native American Women and Plan B report. A lot of pressure, because the petition goes to, once you sign it, a copy goes to the Indian Health Service Director, Dr. Rubidoux, and a copy to Dr. Civilis, the Health and Human Service Secretary of the United States. In late May, I received a letter from Indian Health Service, and I'll get to the meat and potatoes of the letter. It says that the IHS National Core Formulary requires that each facility make a dedicated EC available to eligible Native American and Alaska Native women who request it. Request it. Some of our women don't even know it exists. The IHS is finalizing a policy to make Plan B available in Indian Health Service pharmacies behind the counter and over the counter for female patients ages 17 years and older. These women should be able to obtain the drug directly from the pharmacist. For females age 16 younger, however, prescription is still required. This means that we will not have to wait in the pharmacy, or excuse me, wait in the clinic all day to see a doctor to get a prescription in order to get Plan B. So it's not time to celebrate yet. I wrote back and said, when will the new policies be implemented? Because sometimes it takes a long time for policies to get implemented within Indian Health Service. And then I asked, what does this mean? Excuse me. Will emergency rooms also be able to provide Plan B on request? And does a female have to do intake before receiving Plan B? And what about future use clause? Meaning, can a woman get more than one dose at a time to have on hand in case she needs it? So I'm still waiting for those responses back, but it looks like with the help of our sisters and allies, we are going to get access to Plan B as an OTC soon. Last week, the National Congress of American Indians passed our resolution with flying colors. That represents just about every tribe in the United States. Supporting access to Plan B as an OTC. And I understand that we have a resolution before the national, before now, and I'm not sure if it's gone through or not, or what the process is, but I think it's this morning. Okay, so we plan to send that to Health and Human Services and to Dr. Rubidou, and I'm going to zip off a copy to the White House. You know, President Obama should be supporting this. The White House needs to support this. After all, it's been under his watch that the age was reduced from 18 to 17 for everyone except Native women. So we need to be included and not excluded. Thank you.
Janice Lynch Schuster is an award-winning nonfiction writer, essayist, and poet. She's a senior writer at Alterum Institute and its new Center for Elder Care and Advanced Illness, where she works with researchers and advocates to make it safe to grow old. With Dr. Joanne Lynn, who unfortunately could not be here today due to family obligations, which we as mothers and caregivers understand, right? With Dr. Joanne Lynn, Janice has authored several books on improving care for the end of life. Her most recent work has a title that I just love, called Handbook for Mortals, a guidance for people facing serious illness. She also blogs about aging-related issues at Medicaring.org, Alterum Institute's Health Policy Forum, and then the best one, the Disruptive Women in Healthcare blog. Her writing on family life and culture appear regularly in the Washington Post, and I'm told that one more essay on the issues facing the sandwich generation is set to be published soon. Please help me welcome Janice Lynch Schuster.
I was here yesterday dancing with Eve Ensler, and then getting pumped up by Ellie Sneal, and I thought, does it get any better than this? This is my first NOW conference, and it'll definitely be the first of many. So thank you. When I was 10 in the early 1970s, I really wanted to be an altar girl. I liked the costumes and I liked God. The parish priest said I could not because I was a girl. My mother and sisters and I learned then how much we would need the women's movement to open doors that were closed to us. A few years ago, I had my young son at his pediatrician's office. She's a woman. Then I took him to the dentist, who's also a woman. When he was going to bed that night, he said, "Mommy, can boys be doctors and dentists too?" Now led the way, opening doors, giving us opportunities, helping to see ourselves as powerful girls and women. Even more, it gave us a voice to express what we wanted, who we were, and what we could do. But we still have a long way to go. Today I'd like to talk for a few minutes about the voice of people we don't hear so often, the voices of older women, of frail older adults, and their caregivers. And I have some slides just to inspire you or whatever. That's my dad. He raised a lot of feminists. Last year, my dad was sick. The lingering effects of cancer treatment landed him in the hospital. My family rallied to be at his side, making sure that one of us was always with him. As a writer, I can work anywhere, so I sat by his bed, fielding emails and writing assignments from my office. I actually enjoyed one afternoon when Dad and I sat with my laptop, watching Bruce Springsteen, videos from shows we'd seen over the years. Dad tapped his foot and sang along. I couldn't stay. I was due at my young son's elementary school. And that's my young son. As I rang the school's doorbell, I was struck by this realization. I am one of the statistics about whom I write. Overnight, it seemed, I had joined the sandwich generation, the group of men and women who do double time, caring for aging parents and for their children, young and old. I've also heard that called the mammogram generation, squeezed by both sides. Take your pick. I was flabbergasted. For 15 years, I've written about aging, caregiving, and the end of life. I've talked about the millions of boomers and the havoc we are going to wreak on the healthcare system. I've described our aged parents and the journeys they will face. But until that afternoon, when I was ringing the doorbell, I had never counted myself as one of them. Soon, we will all, one way or another, become one of them. As former First Lady Rosalind Carter has said, there are 4 kinds of people in the world. Those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. I tried to put a different noun in for caregivers to see if that sentence would work no matter what you said. And the only other word I can get to work is people. So give it a try and see if you can fit anything else in. The experience will become nearly universal. Every day, 10,000 boomers turn 65, a flood that will continue for the next 18 years. Fortunately or unfortunately, boomers will live longer and grow sicker, frailer, and older than any other generation in history. I say unfortunately because boomers gave birth to fewer children than their parents did, and so have a smaller pool of people to rely on for caregiving. It will mostly be women who find themselves as caregivers and care recipients. We outlive men. Indeed, those of us who are married to men and become widows will be widowed for an average of 7 years before we die. We often do not have the family caregivers we need. We are 50% more likely to live in a nursing home, and will spend 50% more time there than men do. We are a nation of caregivers. Right now, at any given time, there are some 42 million family caregivers, people who care for a loved one over the age of 50 who is unable to care for herself. There are 20 million sandwich generation caregivers who provide 2.4 billion hours of care each and every year. That's a lot of time. AARP, in this amazing report called Valuing the Invaluable, states that the contributions of unpaid caregivers amount to $450 billion annually. If only we could get a fraction of that to pay for lost wages, for the cost of respite care, or retirement security. And who is the average caregiver? Not surprisingly, it's a 49-year-old working woman who provides about 20 hours of care each week to her mother, and she'll do that for about 5 years. Rewarding though she might find this work, she will also find that it taxes her emotionally, mentally, physically, and financially. Family caregivers face more stress and bear more physical and financial strains than their counterparts. Caregiving can have costly and negative effects on caregivers' lives, on their finances, their retirement, their productivity, and their health. It's amazing that any of us are still standing, and yet here we are, millions of us, making life better, easier, or more manageable for the people we love. I want to tell you what caregivers do. In a world in which patients are discharged quicker and sicker, we do it all, from arranging transportation to and from doctor visits to coordinating hospital discharges. When my dad was sent home after his hospitalization, it was up to my mom to manage things like wound care and IV infusions. She's not a doctor. For my squeamish family, those tasks were really difficult. I think she deserves a medal or a few CMEs. Someone in her position might well feel abandoned and isolated, but her experience is not singular, and it is becoming more commonplace. We need to come to realize and understand that this is an issue that will affect each and every one of us. Every woman in this room will experience this phase of life. And it will affect us first when we are caregivers and later when we are care recipients. We can do a lot to make our lives better. I'm a writer for the Altarim Institute Center for Elder Care and Advanced Illness. We say our mission is making it safe to grow old. By that we mean that we want to create the systems, policies, and structures, financial and otherwise, that will enable us to experience comfort, safety, and meaning when we reach late old age. While we are working to achieve major social changes, we can all do things as individuals. Just as we fought to create better ways to bring babies into the world, we need to fight to find better ways for people who are leaving it. To do that, we need to insist that things change right now, today, for the people we love. For that to happen, four other things need to happen. First, we need to see aging as a distinct phase of the life course, just as we see pediatrics and obstetrics as a special time of life. Aging is a special time of life. We need care plans that are realistic, honest, and shared. And we need those plans to move across settings with us, to be updated regularly, to be honored and enforced. We need to have these conversations with our doctors, no matter what they call them. Third, we need strategies that enable communities to have a hand in managing their services and monitoring their residents' outcomes. And finally, we need systems that can manage our care from start to finish. We only have a short time. Within a dozen years, the number of old people will skyrocket. If we don't have better arrangements to support caregiving, many of them will effectively be abandoned. And we will be abandoned too when our time comes. For most of our lives, boomers have acted like we were the first ones there. The first to go to school or menstruate or give birth or experience menopause. Our mothers told us otherwise. This time around, it is really the first time a generation will have experienced this. And the boomers will be the first to experience what it means to live with so many aged and frail people. It will be up to them, to us, to find ways to shape and define this unprecedented time. Ringing the elementary school doorbell was a lifetime away from ringing the hospital call bell, and it is all part of the continuum. I am on it, traveling as best I can. Millions of my sisters are on the path too. It falls to us now to learn not only how to survive, but thrive. And we need to start now. Now needs to start now. We have a very long way to go and not much time to get there. Thank you.
Last, but of course never least, is a woman who also knows a little more about me than I'm comfortable sharing. My good friend and neighbor, Karen Pope-Onwukwe, is a force to be reckoned with. She is the voice of elder law issues in Maryland. Appointed by Governor Martin O'Malley to the State Advisory Council on Quality Care and End of Life, she is also a past president of the Elder Law Section Council of the Maryland State Bar Association and the Maryland Women's Bar Association. She co-founded and chaired the Elder Law Section of the Prince George's County Bar Association, and since 2003, she has chaired the Prince George's County Executive Aging Advisory Committee. If that weren't enough, Karen also represents Maryland on the Democratic National Committee and leads the local Women for Obama. She has been lauded numerous times by various organizations, so I'm just going to highlight her two most recent ones. This year, she has received the Government's Leadership in Aging 2012 Trailblazer Award and the North Atlantic Region of Alpha Kappa Alpha's 2012 Good Citizenship Award. Please welcome my good friend and neighbor, Karen Pope-Onwukwe.
I am really very pleased to be here. I want to thank Now for the invitation. Thank Alindra for inviting me. This is a topic that is important to me. I'm passionate about it. And I feel good because I'm here with friends. When I got here, the first person I saw was Linda Lamona, who we have been, Malone. We've worked with Alpha Kappa Alpha and women across the state of Maryland to get the Harriet Tubman statue. Yes. Fighting against folks with a lot of power, but we got it done. It took more than a year, but we got it done. And one thing that they did mention, one of the reasons that I've been involved or worked with Now in the past is because I also am the chair of the Maryland NARAL Foundation Board, and I'm very proud of pro-choice women. But I'm here today to talk to you about what I do actually. I tell people I actually work for a living. I work for a living. I'm an elder law attorney. That's a different kind of a practice. And it suits me. And what we do as elder law attorneys, we work with people helping them plan for aging and disability. And as a result of that, I'm on the ground. I see the practical aspects of a lot of policy decisions that are made and how they affect people and women disproportionately. So let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, one of the things that we're seeing, many of you have heard of long-term care and long-term care insurance and things of that nature. And the last speaker talked to you about caregiving, and that's what we're talking about today. I want to encourage you to look at NOW's webpage because they have a lot of statistics on there from the Family Caregiver Alliance that talks about the fact that women are the ones who are doing most of the caregiving in this country. But medical and non-medical care for chronic illness or disability is what we are talking about when we talk about this long-term care. And most people, when they need that type of care, they need support with activities of daily living such as dressing, bathing, and using the bathroom. It can be, you can have this care provided at your home, in a community setting, or in assisted living, and you can use it or need it at any time. I have clients who, they have a catastrophic event, they may have developed multiple sclerosis. It doesn't have to be that you're elderly, but you can at some time need long-term care. About 9 million people over the age of 65 require long-term care. By 2020, they're estimating that 12 million older Americans will need long-term care. Family and friends are the sole caregivers of 70% of the elderly at home. People age 65 have a 40% chance of entering a nursing home, and about 10% of the people who enter a nursing home will stay there for 5 years or more. Medicare does not pay for long-term care. Doesn't pay for it. Your hospitalization insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shield, is not going to pay for long-term care. When you get to a point where you are not improving, you need custodial care, you're not going to get insurance for that. So what happens to those folks? How do we pay for it? Well, you've all heard of Medicaid, and I think the Supreme Court decision yesterday, you heard that word Medicaid, and one of the things that they talked about were these Medicaid waivers. This is an important issue for you to pay attention to because what had happened was Medicaid was created as an insurance program for people who we were finding they didn't have insurance to pay for their care. And most of the calls I get are crisis calls. People that say, Mom is in the hospital, Dad's in the hospital, the doctors are saying they can't go home, they gotta go to a nursing home, and people then find out how much it costs for their parent to go to a nursing home to get that care. And if they go in there and Medicare will pay for the first 100 days, or maybe even not, because Medicare will look and see, is this rehabilitative or not? So what can we do? I'm not going to go through the Medicaid process with you because that's what I do for a living, but I want to challenge you to start thinking about some of the things that we have to look at. There was a report, Marriage, Employment, and Inequality of Women's Lifetime Earned Income. And what they were looking at was U.S. Census information, Social Security information, and looking at women's lifetime earnings. One of the things, we start talking about Social Security. I've worked with a lot of women. They receive less than $1,000 a month from Social Security. And it's because the way that Social Security is set up, it's going to look at what your lifetime earnings have been. And if you have not worked a job, which is provided, Social Security, FICA, or if you've not had that type of an employment history, your income will be lower. I'm going to just read something that they wrote. Under current rules with spousal benefits, Social Security benefits depend on a woman's marital histories as well as their individual earning histories. Since employment and earning increased more among married women than single women, it may be the case that current benefit rules provide limited income security for for women who never marry and have low lifetime earnings. At the same time, current rules may be providing redundant income protection for women who have high lifetime earning of their own. We have to be careful about when you get to the end of life, where is your income coming from? Many women, young women, are deciding they're not going to get married, so they don't need to be penalized at the end when they need that income. They need that monthly Social Security income. The other thing I wanted to talk with you about and ask you to think about is something called pension credit for caregivers, PCC. Now there's a report from the Institute of Women's Policy Research which dealt with this, and what they looked at 7 countries that use this credit. I'll just read you a little bit about it because I don't want to take up too much time, but PCCs, or pension credit for caregivers, are used for prevention of poverty among women, improvements in gender equality, recognition of the social value of unpaid work, incentives for women to take up paid employment, and in some cases to have and raise children. We need to think about giving credit to women who come out of the workforce to have children. You're losing your Social Security benefits at the end. These are things that, because we weren't in the policy seats, we weren't sitting in the chairs, we weren't at the table, we couldn't, and we didn't really think that far ahead. But we need to start thinking that far ahead, because those things, as I see it, are the things that are disproportionately affecting the older women that I deal with, who their husband may die and that pension ends, or that income ends, and there they are. They may have a house, they can't even pay for the house. Their children have to pay, help them to keep going. So we have to think about that. And you know, I love politics and I love a good fight. And we know we have fights ahead of us. But they used to sing a song when I was little in church. And this life is filled with swift transitions. Not unmoved on earth can stand. We have to work on these things, because as the last speaker just said, you can wake up tomorrow morning and you can't get out of the bed. Or you can get a call tomorrow morning. Mom is in the hospital. Dad has had a stroke. And we have to be able to make sure that the quality of life for these folks, these caregivers who have given us care continually through our lives, that it is not diminished in the sunset of their lives. So thank you very much for your time.
Mothers and Caregivers Plenary, but don't move. We have one very special award to give out, and I'm actually very honored to be able to do this. So, I don't know how many years ago, Linda's going to correct me, or Lynette's going to correct me, Equal Visibility Everywhere, EVE, came up with a project called the Statue Project, which looked at the statues in Statuary Hall and said, we need more statues from women. Every state is allowed 2 statues that get cycled through Statuary Hall, and EVE said, we need more women. They came to Maryland Now and said, you need more women. Maryland Now looked at the statues that were in there and said, we're on it. So, they decided on Harriet Tubman to represent Maryland. She's a Maryland native, and she will be the first full statue of an African-American woman in Statuary Hall. Long fight. They did not get Statuary Hall. Yep. They got the Capitol. So it is my distinct honor to present to the hard-working women of Maryland Now the certificate of recognition from National Now. Thank you. I have nothing more to say but thank you. Accepting this award on behalf of Maryland Now President Linda Mahoney.
Well, we don't ever turn down an opportunity to thank our national officers for their support, and without national, we would not be here today, and we do the best we can to help them, and today we're just going to celebrate them with Harriet Tubman t-shirts. I have to read you the back, and try not to tear up.
That isn't going to happen.
If you are tired, keep going. If you are scared, keep going. If you are hungry, keep going. If you want freedom, keep going. We scheduled for Harriet Tubman to come visit us today. Reincarnated. She's had, we had a little storm here, I think some of you may have noticed. And so there's been a little delay, but she'll be at the Maryland Now table later on this afternoon if you want to drop by and say hello. Thank you very much.
And with that, the Mothers and Caregivers Plenary is adjourned. Please enjoy the rest of the conference.